everyone, and welcome to Playlist Pages. Today we're talking about Beloved. Welcome to another brand new series. This is going to be quite a long one as I want to go into a lot of depth over each individual chapter. And today we're going to be talking about the very first part and the first 5 or so chapters. Beloved is a novel about a family who is simply trying to survive and live like their situation demands because they understand the inevitability of their haunting past and they attempt to come to terms with it and to try and be their own individuals while also being plagued and held down by the traumatic events of history. They are very aware that their grief is only a microcosm of the wider amount of suffering that slaves and black people had to go through in America, but Toni Morrison shows us that with the right kind of love, with the right kind of attention, even though the scars run deep, we can still attempt to persist and attempt to survive. And although it's a heartbreaking novel, it's an incredibly powerful and a motivational one at that. Really changed my outlook on a lot of things when I read it, so I really hope that you will enjoy this video. Beloved wants someone to just pay attention to her. She just wants someone to fix her issues, but she doesn't know how. And so like the ghost she is, she just claims them and attempts to haunt them, but it's not out of hate or anything of the kind. It's more because she just wants things to get better. The book is a reminder about persistence and strength and the desperation of human spirit, and how even if you want to escape the past, it's inescapable, and no matter how far you run, it will catch up to you, which is why that racism is still deeply rooted in America today, and why the legacy still haunts and resonates with the people living there. The story of Margaret Gardner was Morrison's inspiration, the story of an escaped slave who killed her daughter when she was recaptured because she would rather she was free than go back to the past. It speaks of the desperation and the horrific actions of the time, that she would rather kill her daughter by her own hand than the slow death and repeated punishment of being enslaved. Beloved is a very difficult novel to place in the genre. It blends magic, reality, but it's founded on grim history. It's a gothic novel in many ways, but to dismiss it as such would be a superficial attempt to try and escape the past and the guilt that America shows. Exactly what Morrison highlights is an impossibility. Yet, it's unfair to call it historical fiction, because the most frightening part of the story is the part that it is true. The novel starts straight away with a description of a house. Toni Morrison wrote in her introduction to Beloved that I wanted the reader to be kidnapped. Just like many slaves were ruthlessly thrown from one place into another, uprooted from the few bits of legacy, few bits of roots that they had, the few bits of people who managed to make it out alive, thrown into a new unfamiliar setting with new people that they do not know, a completely different environment with its own set of hierarchies and rules. Likewise, Toni Morrison wants us to be thrown into this claustrophobic house, into a situation where we can't adapt. She wants us to experience that same penetrating fear and grief, and that is how she does it with her house number 124. So the house 124 is just another, like the number is just another way to separate it from the houses, because it's not quite the luxury or well-suited sweet home plantation. It doesn't have a nice name, even though a sweet home was of course ironically named, but it is a house that is owned by a former slave. It's a property that an escaped slave could be proud of because it shows that they made it. It shows that they survived. It shows that they were strong enough. The house is important, but it's also just a house. It's not a home, not really. It's a house with a personality, but it's far away from a normal life, from a life that could ever be normal when you're so haunted by the past. 124 was spiteful, full of a baby's venom, and that one line tells you everything. It's honestly so incredible, and it characterizes the situation so well. It's spiteful, it's bitter, it's terrifying, because the childish innocence of Beloved was disillusioned. It was killed because she was born at the wrong place at the wrong time. At first, the reader won't understand this line. Why is it full of a baby's venom? But only later do you piece it together, and that's that aha moment. Morrison's writing is truly so careful. Her descriptions are so apt. The way that she pieces the novels together, the novel is quite fragmented and it jumps a lot back in time. Like, it's similar to Dracula in a way, even though because Dracula was an epistolary novel, but those jumps are more nuanced and they have a sense of purpose. And Morrison chooses carefully when to focus on the present and on the inescapable past, and she allows the past to sometimes consume the reader entirely, or sometimes she distances us from that, showing that we could never even begin to understand the horrors that went on, even though we should do our very best to try and ensure that this never happens again. And I think that it shows Morrison to be an incredibly talented writer. With time, by 1873, all the inhabitants of the house except Sethi and Denver move out. The grandmother, who was called Baby Suggs, is dead, and the sons, Denver's brothers, called Howard and Burglar, ran away. Burglar ran away when as soon as he looked in the mirror it would shatter, and Howard ran away when there were two tiny handprints appearing in the cake. Sethi is their mother and Denver their sister, and now mother and daughter are alone in the gray and white house on Bluestone Roads. 1873, the year when this book set, is just 8 years after the end of the Civil War. The memories still haunt the population because, of course, how can you escape this? And at the time, many states would have still been indecisive. Indecisive about their laws, indecisive about what way to carry on when America has experienced so much. And so the characters live in this state of indecision, in a suspense caught between the present and the past and the future. Baby Suggs, for example, suspended between the nastiness of life and the meanness of death. She couldn't get interested in leaving life or living it. Her past had been like her present, intolerable. The grandma is left indifferent to whatever happens, even when Howard and Burglar ran away, because the Civil War may be over, but it is far from over in the minds of the inhabitants of House 124 and the rest of America. After Baby Suggs' death, Sethi and Denver attempt to summon the ghost of Beloved and to finally deal with it once and for all, but the ghost refuses to come forward. Just when you call for it, just when you think that you're ready for it, the ghost doesn't show up. And at that point, Sethi is prompted to think back to Beloved, and we find out that Beloved, she had that word engraved on her dead baby's grave, and the guy said that 10 minutes and I'll do it for free. So what she had to do was she had to sell her body just for those words, for Beloved. This was the one word that mattered. It was enough. And it's this theme of some things being much more important than wealth or even bodily autonomy. She's trying to make up for the grief that she has caused Beloved. She's trying to make up for the pain of killing her one daughter. And I think that for her, the choice was very clear. It wasn't about her body, it was about her past. But she didn't count on the soul of her baby girl. Who would have thought that a little old baby could harbor so much rage? She can't atone and she can't escape her past no matter what. And Baby Suggs suggests, she once suggests leaving the house, but Baby Suggs in response says, "Not a house in the country ain't packed its rafter with some dead grief." This is exactly it. It's not the house itself, it's the memories. They could move, but the ghost of Beloved would follow them wherever they go. It's a foolish move to attempt to escape the past. The house is just a smaller case in a wider phenomenon. And we talked before about how they used to live on Sweet Home, a plantation, which was of course anything but sweet. And 124 may not be sweet, it's spiteful, it's full of a baby's venom, but they chose that spite because they chose that freedom. This is the price that they have to pay, but at least they know that they are free. And Baby Suggs tells Sethi that she should just be grateful that she has 3 living sons because all of her 8 children are dead. But for her part, Sethi says that Howard and Burglar may as well be dead. She only just has Denver. These are a few of the things that we learned about Beloved early on. We already begin to understand where the title of the novel comes from this hugely shocking incident straight away, from a mother being forced to sell her own body because she can't afford to have her dead daughter's name engraved. But of course, it's not about the engraving, it's about the innocence of the lost child. Sethi then has another flashback to her life at Sweet Home and how the place had really beautiful trees, and she knows that she shouldn't think about the trees because boys hanging from the most beautiful sycamores in the world. Even the beautiful is polluted by the past. Even she can't even think about the wonderful trees because she knows that those trees, that's just a superficial covering of the truly despicable things that really went on at those plantations. And we also find out that actually Baby Suggs is not Sethi's mother. She is actually the mother of Holly. Holly was the father of Denver and Beloved and her other children, I assume. He basically paid to free Baby Suggs because he worked on Sundays for 5 years, and they brought in Sethi to replace her. And when she goes out to wash her clothes by the river, and when she comes back to the house, she sees Paul D., a man she knew from the plantation, peach-stone skin, straight-backed. For a man with an immobile face, it was amazing how ready it was to smile or blaze or be sorry with you, as though all you had to do was get his attention, and right away he produced the feeling you were feeling. Was less than a blink his face seemed to change. Underneath it lay the activity. And it's clear that although Sethi does not want to bring back the memories of the past, she has warm associations with the men at the plantation who she said always treated her with brotherly flirtation. And Paul D, for his part, is proud of Well, he's proud of her escaping by herself, but he's also upset that he couldn't be there to help her. We have a description of Sethi from Paul D's perspective, the one with iron eyes and backbone to match. He had never seen her hair in Kentucky, and though her face was 18 years older than when last he saw her, it was softer now because of the hair, a face too still for comfort. Iris is the same color as her skin, which, in her still face, used to make him think of a mask with mercifully punched out eyes. Hallie's woman. What a wonderful description. Iron eyes. She's unyielding, she's metal, Ceci's a fighter, and there's nothing she would do for survival. She invites him into her home, and with it she begins to, in a way, address her past rather than turning it away. Paul D also observes, as soon as he walks in, the spot where the grief had soaked him. The red was gone, but a kind of weeping clung to the air where it had been. Paul D thinks about how all the men at the plantation didn't touch Sethi because of her iron eyes. They were all sexually frustrated. They had no women. They were all even sleeping with cows, but still they didn't touch her because of the iron in her eyes, and they wanted it to be her choice. And by the end, that's why she chose Hallie, because he was working all those Sundays. And it's a fascinating power dynamic. Was it really her choice? If she can definitely feel the atmosphere, and also she's desperate for her life herself. She's desperate to try and pretend, at least somehow, that the things she's experiencing are remotely normal so that she can deal with them. She just wanted to have love, and the men wanted physical contact. And so Sethi, a young girl, essentially that's what happened to her. This is her story. And Denver observes carefully her mother as she plunges into the past and into her memories, and she thinks that with around Paul D, she's acting like a young girl. She's acting her age because she has been forced to age earlier than she should have been. Her childhood was ripped away from her. The one who never looked away, who when a man got stomped to death by a mare right in front of Sawyer's restaurant did not look away, and when a sow began eating her own litter did not look away then either, and when the baby spirit picked up Hereboy and slammed him into the wall hard enough to break 2 of his legs and dislocate his eye, so hard he went into convulsions and chewed up his tongue, still her mother had not looked away. She had taken a hammer, knocked the dog unconscious, wiped away the blood and saliva, pushed his eye back in his head, and set his leg bones. Morrison really does not shy away from descriptions and her characterizations. Beloved is a brutal novel, but it is an eye-opener. Morrison does not run away, and neither should we. Denver talks about how her mother sees the ghost of Beloved as sad, but for her the ghost is more lonely and rebuked. She suffers. She doesn't have friends because people avoid them like the plague. Denver seems to be a very timid character at the beginning, especially compared to Sethi. Sethi wants Denver to have a childhood. She wants to deal with the load. She wants to protect her only daughter. But at the same time, she still has obligations to her dead daughter. Sethi still refuses to move, and we truly see her iron in this quote. No more running from nothing. I will never run from another thing on this earth. I took one journey and I paid for the ticket, but let me tell you something, Bodhi Garner. It cost too much. Do you hear me? It cost too much. She ran once and she paid the price by the death of Beloved. She used this house as her burden to bear, and she confesses to Paul D that once her breast was heavy with milk and she was pregnant with Beloved, and these men stole her milk, and when she told people of what happened, they whipped her, and her back was opened, and it reminds her of a cherry tree. And about her confessions, she says, there was something blessed in his manner. Women saw him and wanted to weep, to tell him that their chest hurt and their knees did too. Strong women and wise saw him and told him things they only told each other. The way past the change of life, desire in them had suddenly become enormous, greedy, more savage than when they were 15, and that it embarrassed them and made them sad, that secretly they longed to die, to be quit of it, that sleep was more precious to them than any waking day. Paul D settles down to live with them, and at one point the house starts physically shaking, and he has enough. He grabs a table and he shakes it at the wall and says, "You want to fight? Come on. God damn it, she got enough without you. She got enough." And after that, it was gone. But Denver seems to be the only one who's saddened, because now she feels truly alone. And now her mother was upstairs with the man who had gotten rid of the only other company she had. Denver dipped a bit of bread into the jelly. Slowly, methodically, miserably, she ate it. Which brings us on to chapter 2. This chapter isn't actually numbered, but for the sake of orienteering ourselves, I did number the spaces in part 1. Chapter 2 starts with intimacy. It's a juxtaposition to Denver's loneliness. This is how the chapters go. They go on a high, they go on a low, because some days you feel like you did it, you got over the past, whereas other days the reminder of what you went through is thrown in your face. Merely kissing the wrought iron on her back had shook the house, had made it necessary for him to beat it to pieces. Now he would do more. It's a very slow description of how Bodhi and Sethi go upstairs, how it's over so quickly because they can barely remember desire. It's been so long, they don't want to trust each other. And after the act, they lie together, resentful of one another in the skylight above them. His dreaming of her had been too long and too long ago. Her deprivation had been not having any dreams of her own at all. Now they were sorry and too shy to make talk. They realize that they haven't even taken off their clothes fully. They just went at it. We see Ceci's distrust of men. They encouraged you to put some of your weight in their hands, and as soon as you felt how light and lovely that was, they studied your scars and tribulations, after which they did what he had done, ran her children out and tore up the house. For both Sethi and Poldi, they wanted to feel each other, and it wasn't something like love, it was just intimacy, the urge for human contact, the desperation to say I'm still human and I can have this love. And Boji thinks back to his own experience and the men on the Sweet Home plantation, and how there was this man called Sixo who walked for 17 hours to see a woman once, and he thinks now that was a man, and this woman, she's not a woman, she's not a man, she's not a person, she's a tree. And it's somewhat ironic that he says that because trees were inviting, things you could trust and be near, talk to if you wanted to. And he doesn't feel that way about Sethi because they don't have this emotional intimacy. That's why it feels so uncomfortable. Sethi threw things back to the past and the other men. She worked in the house, she would go out to bring the men food, and she felt safe, and the 5 men never touched her in the night, only lifted their hats to greet her, and they didn't want to touch her, they avoided touching her, perhaps because for them she was temptation. She was their sign that they're not animals, that they're true men. She thinks back to baby Sug's words, who said that a man ain't nothing but a man, but a son, well now, that's somebody. And that stuck with them. Because all their lives, men and women were moved around like checkers. Anybody baby Suggs knew, let alone loved, who hadn't run off or been hanged, got rented out, loaned out, bought up, brought back, stored up, mortgaged, won, stolen, or seized. That was why Thessie was considered so lucky for living with Holly, who was a somebody, who had concrete roots, who wasn't like the rest of them, people that aren't fully people because their only shared history is pain. And going back to the tree that plays quite an important role, I think it's a symbol for history and for that idea of roots. Sethi's scar is a tree because her history lives deep within her. Trees can be beautiful, can decorate property, but they can also be a cover for dark things, with the men hanging from the trees. Paul D observes her, and he observes the fact that suddenly his desire is gone. Sethi's eyes were closed, her hair a mess. Looked at this way, minus the polished eyes, her face was not so attractive, so it must have been her eyes that kept him both guarded and stirred up. Without them, her face was manageable, a face he could handle. Maybe she would keep them closed like that, but no, there was her mouth. Nice. Holly never knew what he had. Sethi feels his gaze, and she thinks back to how this experience is different from Holly. They had very few such intimate moments. They only saw each other from a distance in the daylight and from really up close in the darkness. She thinks about how Miss Garner had allowed them to marry, but laughed at the idea of a wedding. That would mean they were people, and how they had consummated the marriage with Holly in the cornfield, thinking they were hidden, but the corn had moved above their heads, alerting everyone. Who could miss a ripple in a cornfield on a quiet, cloudless day? Polity is also thinking about that day because it was unfortunately a public affair. Their private, most intimate moment was turned into an entertainment for the men, who all sat there and tried not to do anything and to respect their privacy. And after that, they broke some of the corn, and they told Mr. Garner that it was a raccoon, and he pretended to believe them, and they had a feast, and she touched Holly's back and she touched the corn, and there was no accounting for the way that simple joy could shake you. How loose the silk, how fine and loose and free. Ironically, the silk of the corn is far more loose and free, but Mr. Garner and Miss Garner do allow them this little bit of humanity. And even that private moment was not really private. Denver's secrets were secret. So the last chapter ended with a not so secret moment and now we get back to Denver's secrecy. These tiny moments of difference between Ceci and Denver really highlight how different they are and just how different Denver's life gets to be from Ceci's. Ceci ensures it. Denver's secret is she has a hiding space. 5 boxwood bushes planted in a ring had started stretching towards each other 4 feet off the ground to form a round empty room 7 feet high, its walls 50 inches of murmuring leaves. This room is at first a playhouse, then a hiding space, then a place for her imagination, and she goes there to try out perfume. That's her secret guilty pleasure that takes her into a whole different world. There's a description of how one day she got cold and headed back into the house, and I think it's a very significant one because it shows how Denver views beloved compared to her mother. Shivering, Denver approached the house, regarding it, as she always did, as a person rather than a structure. A person that wept, sighed, trembled, and fell into fits. Her steps and her gaze were the cautious ones of a child approaching a nervous, idle relative, someone dependent but proud. From the outside, Denver sees her mother praying, and a girl with a white dress kneeling down and embracing her mother. That makes Denver think of her own birth. It's a very vague description, but her mother had told her that Denver was born in a canoe, with a white girl helping her mother. We then switched to Ceci's POV and how Denver was born. Ceci was walking through the forest, barely alive, until she fell and could not get up, and she was going to just lie and give up when she heard footsteps and saw a white girl, the raggediest looking trash you ever saw. The girl's name was Amy, and she had a lot of hair and arms like cane stalks. She didn't look at anything quickly. She talked so much it wasn't clear how she could breathe at the same time. Instead of lying to her, for some reason Sethi tells her the truth, that she's running. The girl is going to Boston for velvet, and Sethi and Amy start a conversation, even though they don't look at each other. Amy tells her there's a house nearby, and while Sethi crawls, Amy walks and talks next to her, and the sound helps Sethi and calms the baby down. And like that, Sethi and her baby survived. Denver brings herself back to the present and goes to tell her mother about the clinging white dress. Her mother tells her that some things just stay, which is why she should never go back to the plantation, because it's going to be always there, waiting for you. That haunting past is always stalking. Indeed, that is the reason that Sethi can't commit to Paul D, because she always feels like there will be something there stalking her, that her past is inescapable, that she can't commit to another person and give her love because of all the pain she went through. Paul D, for his part, he wants to give it a try, but he's concerned about Denver. He talks to Sethi because Denver is waiting for something she's expecting, and it's aimed me. But Sethi is confident that Denver is protected and charmed. She survived even jail. Because eventually school teacher found her with a shotgun and he sent Sethi to jail. To Sethi, the future was a matter of keeping the past at bay. The better life that she believes she and Denver were living was simply not the other one. The fact that Paul D had come out of that other one into her bed was better too, and the notion of a future with him, or for that matter without him, was beginning to stroke her mind. As for Denver, the job Sethi had of keeping her from the past that was still waiting for her was all that mattered. It's interesting to compare the different coping mechanisms every character has in this novel to deal with the past. For Ceci, it's something like pretending the issues are not there and trying to live her life. This is why she stays in the house. For Paul D, it's looking for a better future. For Denver, it's just an attempt to find a friend. For Denver, this is recent history, but this is not her history, and I think that's why she's looking for Beloved, to help her understand. That's what she's waiting for. Denver is not happy with Paul D being in the house, and eventually she outright asks him how long he's going to hang around. This of course hurts Paul D, who drops his coffee, but nobody cares about the shattered cup. Ceci is furious but more so embarrassed. She sends her daughter away, and she begins an argument with Paul D because she says she apologizes for her daughter, and he tells her that it's not her job to apologize. Why is her mouth like that? But Sethi says, like, you can't scold my daughter, only I can. She's protective because this is her only daughter and she wants to claim her rights, but also her wrongs as well. She wants to claim the mistakes. Risky, thought Baldy, very risky. For a used-to-be slave woman to love anything that much was dangerous, especially if it was her children she had settled into love. The best thing he knew was to love just a little bit, everything, just a little bit. So when they broke its back or shoved it in a corner sack, well, maybe you'd have a little love left over for the next one. He asks Sethi about it, and he reminds her that she won't always be there to protect Denver, but her response is merely that I'll protect her while I'm alive and I'll protect her when I ain't. For Sethi, in a way, her care for Denver is a way to overcompensate for her failure to take care of Beloved. What Paul Dean says next just wrenches my heart completely. He highlights that it's not about asking Sethi to choose either him or Denver, because of course the choice is clear. It's about making space for somebody along her. He wants to be involved in Denver's life. He wants to be there for both of them. Jump if you want to, because I'll catch you, girl. I'll catch you before you fall. Go as far inside as you need to. I'll hold your ankles. Make sure you get back out. When I got here and sat out there on the porch waiting for you, well, I knew it wasn't the place I was heading towards. It was you. We can make a life, girl. A life. He asks Sethi to try, and when she reluctantly agrees, he tells her that there's a carnival tomorrow, and they should go. And so they go. They were not holding hands, but their shadows were. Sethi looked to her left, and all three of them were gliding over the dust holding hands. Maybe he was right. A life. Denver is sulking, but Baldy is happy. He's overjoyed at finally having a family of his own. He's saying hello to everyone and laughing at the crowds and laughing all the time. And Ceci notices that their shadows are holding hands, and nothing can ruin this perfect day, not even the stench of rotten roses. It made them a little dizzy and very thirsty, but did nothing to extinguish the eagerness of the colored people filling down the road. It's a celebration, and it's a chance for all of them to have a normal life and to forget about their problems, even if it's just for one day. It's magical. And it's magical because it's not true, because this is some sort of haven away from the real world, and the price is absolutely worth it because for the first time, it's not the black folks entertaining the white folks, it's the other way around. And of course, they're racist and some of them spit at them, but they can't do anything. And Sethy thinks that that's beautiful. That's worth the price of pennies. And even Denver is soothed by sugar, all the licorice and peppermint and lemonade, and she begins to think that maybe it's not so bad having Bodhi around. He lights up the room and he buys Denver everything she asks for, and he even buys her things that she doesn't ask for. He drags Sethy into tents, he gives her candy, he forcefully feeds it into her mouth, he makes everyone happy around him, and he talks to people and he introduces them, and he even discusses work. It finally looks like they're settling down, and Sethy is happy, and Sethy also greets people and returns smile, and Denver sways with delight. And it made my heart sing to see this chapter end with this line. And on the way home, although leading them now, the shadows of three people still held hands. Unfortunately, though, that happiness is about to all go wrong because near 124, a fully dressed young woman comes out of the river. Everything hurt, but her lungs most of all. She tries to get used to the weight of her body. Nobody saw her emerge, but if they did, they likely wouldn't approach, because she looks like an alcoholic with her straw hat askew, their shoes undone, her constant exhaustion, her skinny neck, her dress, her strange smile. She also had new skin, mindless and smooth. When Sassy sees the woman, she rushes straight away to the bathroom, asking to excuse herself. She barely makes it there. The water she avoided was endless. We get it. It's a rebirth. Quite literally, Beloved emerges from the river, and the water, like Sethy loses her water, so she's giving birth. It's her pregnancy 2.0. When she returns, she finds Baldy, Denver, and the stranger in the house, and the woman is drinking. She's so thirsty. She drinks cup after cup after cup because she's thirsty for her mother's love, and she gazes at Sethy with sleepy eyes. Her skin was flawless except for 3 vertical scratches on her forehead, so fine that they seemed at first like black hair, baby hair before it bloomed and roped into the masses of black yarn under her head. When asked for her name, she says beloved. She spelled it for them, slowly, as though the letters were being formed as she spoke them. Sethy is touched by her sweet name. Beloved, however, simply collapses and falls asleep. When woken up, she collapses again. They declare her sick, but Denver adamantly refuses to accept that. There's passion in her voice, and Denver tends to her lovingly, rinsing the sheets secretly and boiling the underwear and praying that the fever would pass without damage. Patience, something Denver had never known, overtook her. As long as her mother did not interfere, she was a model of compassion, turning waspish though when Sethy tried to help. This is the friend she had been waiting for her sister. Beloved finally opens her eyes. It wasn't that she was looking at the face for the first time with no trace of sleep in it, or that the eyes were big and black, nor was it that the whites of them were much too white, blue-white. It was that deep down in those big black eyes there was no expression at all. Denver's heart only stops shaking when Beloved smiles at her, because of course she's eager for her sister to love her, to not blame her. Although she looks 19 or 20, Beloved moves like a heavier one or an older one. She doesn't have anywhere to go, and Sethy decides to let her stay, though Bodhi is irritated and distrustful because she acts sick, sounds sick, but she don't look sick. Good skin, bright eyes, and strong as a bull. He tells her that he saw Beloved lift up a chair with one hand and Denver was there, but when asked to testify, essentially, Denver says no. She makes a decision right then and there. She chooses Beloved. If there had been an open latch between them, it would have closed. I hope you enjoyed the video with the first 5 chapters of Beloved with a summary and analysis. Please stay tuned for part 2, where hopefully we can cover more chapters. And I do anticipate that this series will be a longer one, but this is one of my favorite books of all time, and so I hope that you will share the passion and join me for the series. Thanks so much for watching.